On my friend's birthday, I went out for a smoke with my fiancée's friend. She suddenly said, "I'm in love with you, and your fiancé has been cheating with your friend for 2 months." I told her, no way. But when we walked back into the bar, I saw. That night should have been simple. My friend's birthday, loud music, cheap drinks, the usual chaos that makes you forget real life for a few hours. But situations turn fast, especially when you take one step outside a crowded bar for a smoke. I didn't know I was stepping into the moment that would flip the last 2 months of my life upside down. She stood beside me in the cold air, shifting her weight like she was about to gamble everything she had. That was the bet. She was wagering her friendship, her reputation, and whatever she felt for me on the words she was about to say. And the question that hit me like a punch was simple. If the person you trust the most is the one betraying you, what do you do when the proof is walking right back into the bar with you? I met my fiancé's friend Selen years ago, long before I even knew I'd end up engaged. She had always been one of those people who blended into the background, but still noticed everything. The kind of person who didn't talk much, but when she did, you listened. My fiancée Layla used to joke that Selen was the unofficial historian of the friend group. If anyone needed to remember a date, a name, or a tiny detail, you asked her. That night, she wasn't quiet. She wasn't reserved. She was shaking. I stepped out of the bar to get fresh air after my friend tugged me into 3 consecutive shots. Outside, the cold hit immediately, and I lit a cigarette to steady myself. Selen followed me out, pulling her jacket tighter, like she needed courage from the night air. At first, she tried small talk. Something about the playlist inside. Something about my drink. But her voice cracked on the second sentence, and she stopped pretending. She turned toward me, swallowed hard, and pushed out the words that felt like someone dropping a brick down my spine. She said she was in love with me. Then she added that Layla had been cheating with my friend for 2 months. Those 2 sentences hit completely differently. The first felt misplaced. Wrong setting, wrong moment. The second felt like a threat to the ground I was standing on. My knee-jerk reaction was disbelief. Selen and Layla were practically sisters. They'd grown up together, shared secrets, fought side by side in college. And the friend she accused, I had known him since we were kids. He was the one I moved furniture with, the one who helped me fix my car when I didn't have enough money to take it to a shop. I told her there was no way any of this made sense. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just said she was tired of watching me be played for a fool. The way she said it made me pause, but only for a second. I kept telling myself she must be drunk, jealous, or spiraling emotionally. It didn't feel rational, and I didn't want to take a single step into considering it. My brain rejected the idea instantly, like touching something boiling hot. You pull away because the alternative is to burn. I flicked my cigarette away and told her we were going back inside. If Layla was really cheating, I would have seen something. Anything. A sign. A shift. A message. A fight. A weird absence. But the last 2 months had been normal. Busy, sure, but normal. Selen walked beside me without speaking. She moved like someone bracing for impact. The bar was packed when we went back in. Music thumped from every corner, and the lights blended into messy streaks. The smell of spilled beer mixed with cheap cologne hung in the air. It was the kind of place where cheating would be impossible to hide. Too many eyes. Too much energy. Too much noise. But the second we stepped past the doorway, I saw the scene that froze the blood in my veins. Layla was pressed against the narrow hallway wall that led to the bathrooms. Not kissing. Not touching. But it was worse. She was standing too close to my friend. Close enough that her breath fogged the collar of his shirt. Close enough that she looked like someone trying to hide a secret in plain sight. Her hand was clenched tightly around something, and his hand was bracing the wall behind her head like he was blocking her escape. The moment she saw me, her shoulders stiffened. His eyes widened. Selen stopped walking entirely, as though she expected this exact image. I walked forward slowly, pushing past 2 people who were waiting for the restroom. And as I approached, Layla straightened her posture too fast, like someone caught preparing a lie. My friend turned away abruptly, bumping a waiter and sending drinks flying across a nearby table. The room erupted. People yelled, someone cursed, a glass shattered. But I didn't care about any of that. I asked Layla what was going on. She stammered out something about helping him find his lost wallet. Her words didn't match her expression. Her eyes were wild, darting from me to Selen to the exit. The object in her hand, whatever she'd been gripping, disappeared into her jacket pocket with a shaky movement she tried to hide. My friend didn't stick around. He pushed through the crowd, knocking over another chair in the process, and stormed toward the back door of the bar. The way he moved told me Selen hadn't lied completely. Something was there. Something ugly. I followed him with my eyes until he vanished outside. Then I turned to Layla again. She kept talking, but every explanation made less sense. She claimed they were only talking. She said he needed advice. She said she was trying to fix an argument between me and him that I didn't even know we were having. She even tried to claim she and Selin had planned a surprise for me, and that things got mixed up. Mixed up. That was her phrasing. Selin stepped closer, her voice steady, and she told me again that Layla was lying. She repeated the part about the 2 months. This time she added that Layla had been sneaking out while telling me she was working late. The people around us started paying attention. One girl whispered something to her boyfriend. Someone else moved their drink aside, as if preparing to intervene if things escalated. It was suddenly too many eyes, too many breaths, too many chances for my fiancée to twist the story into something convenient. I asked her what she had in her pocket. She froze. Completely froze. Her body language shifted from panic to stiff, the kind of stiffness you see in someone whose story just ran out of space. I stepped forward and reached for her jacket. She flinched backward instantly. That tiny reaction broke the last piece of denial I'd been clinging to. She muttered something about needing air and tried to move past me. Selin blocked her path. Layla snapped at her, telling her to back off, calling her jealous, saying she was ruining everything. Selin didn't budge. Layla pushed her shoulder hard and tried again to get away, but I grabbed her arm. Not to hold her, but to stop her from running before answering a single clear question. She pulled away, shaking, saying she couldn't do this here. I told her she didn't get to choose the timing anymore. Before she could reply, the back door slammed open, and my friend reappeared. His shirt collar was pulled sideways like someone had grabbed it. His face was red, breath ragged, and he looked ready to explode or collapse. He pointed at me and yelled that I needed to hear the truth, but not from her. He said I had been left out of something that involved more than cheating. Something about money. Something that happened before I ever proposed. Layla screamed his name, telling him to shut up. Selin whispered that she had warned me. The people around us quieted down, sensing that the night was no longer just a bar argument, but something deeper. I stood in the center of it, staring at the two people I trusted the most, both unraveling in ways I had never seen. And for the first time that night, I felt the ground shifting under me. The night wasn't collapsing. It had collapsed already. And I understood Selin wasn't confessing because she was desperate. She was confessing because she knew everything was about to explode anyway. The music inside the bar didn't match the atmosphere anymore. A birthday party with flashing lights and cheap shots shouldn't have had the air of a courtroom, but every eye turned toward us carried judgment. The chaos from the spilled drinks had faded, and the crowd made space around us like they instinctively knew something heavier was unfolding. Layla stood in front of me, still gripping her jacket pocket, while my friend hovered by the back door like he wanted to speak, but feared what would happen once the words left his mouth. Selin stayed close, her arms folded, her expression too steady for someone who had just blown up her friend's relationship. I told them we were stepping outside. If we stayed inside the bar, someone would call security. Someone would film. Someone would twist the story. I didn't want witnesses, I wanted answers. Outside, the cold felt sharper. The air between us carried a tension heavy enough to choke on. My friend began pacing, muttering that this wasn't supposed to happen like this. Layla begged him not to say anything, insisting she could fix it. Selin told her to stop pretending. I asked them all to shut up for a second and talk one by one. My friend stopped pacing, inhaled deeply, and said the first thing that began to crack the surface of the real story. He told me the problem wasn't cheating. Not exactly. He claimed there was something involving money, a debt, and Layla had been trying to manage it in secret. Layla immediately cut him off and told me he was twisting everything. She said she had asked him for help months before I proposed, back when she was overwhelmed with her student loans. According to her, he gave her advice and walked her through a budgeting plan. She insisted that their late-night talks were about finances and nothing romantic. Her words sounded rehearsed. Too neat. Too clean. Selin nodded slowly, as if she expected that lie. She stepped forward and told me to check the coat room inside the bar. She said my friend had stashed something there. Something that belonged to both him and Layla. Layla snapped again, claiming Selin was obsessed with ruining her. My friend grew louder, insisting he didn't stash anything, and that Selin was dragging me deeper into chaos out of pure jealousy. 3 different explanations. 3 different tones. 3 different agendas. All layered on top of each other like pages torn from different books. I didn't waste time arguing. I walked back into the bar and headed straight to the coat room. My pulse wasn't racing. It was steady. When the truth is close enough, your body stops panicking and starts preparing. Inside the coat room, jackets hung in uneven rows. Scarves draped off metal hooks. A faint smell of fabric softener mixed with spilled beer drifted through the room. I started checking pockets. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. But Selin wouldn't have sent me here unless she was certain. Then I found it. A thin black envelope tucked behind a heavy winter coat that didn't belong to me. It had a name scribbled on the corner, my friends. I opened it without hesitation. Inside were 3 things: a handful of bills, a small notebook with dates and initials, and several printed photographs of Layla entering a motel late at night. My jaw didn't clench. My breath didn't shake. It was the numb realization that damage had roots deeper than a simple affair. When I stepped back outside, the 3 of them turned toward me like they could hear the truth rustling in my hands. I held up the envelope. Layla went pale. My friend covered his face with one hand. Selin stood completely still. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I asked them to explain the envelope. Just that. A clear question they couldn't dodge by talking over each other. Layla reached for it immediately, her voice rising, saying she could explain everything. She insisted the photos were taken out of context. She said she had gone to the motel to meet someone who could help with her debt. She said the money wasn't what it looked like. She said the notebook was part of an old job. Her words stacked on top of each other too fast. Not lies. Not truths. Something in between. My friend stepped forward and reached for the notebook, insisting I give it to him before things got out of hand. He was breathing heavily, and the way he reached told me he needed the evidence gone. I pulled my hand back and told him not to touch anything. Selin stepped closer and told me to open the notebook to the most recent page. I flipped it open. The initials on the fresh date were clear. Not mine. Not hers. Not his. 2 letters I had never seen before. Layla whispered something like a plea. Something about protecting me from a mess I didn't deserve. My friend exhaled shakily, muttering that he had tried to handle things quietly. Selin looked at Layla with disgust and said this was exactly why she had confessed earlier, because she couldn't watch me be dragged into whatever twisted arrangement they had created. I felt none of the usual movie-like shock people imagine. No dramatic collapse. No immediate fury. Just a slow, steady clarity forming in the back of my head. I asked my friend why he had been meeting Layla at a motel behind my back. His shoulders slumped. He said it wasn't what I thought. He claimed he had stepped in to help her because she owed someone money and didn't want me involved. He said the person she owed wasn't letting her go without demanding more than just cash. That line, more than cash, made Selin roll her eyes like she'd heard it before. I told him that if he was just helping her, he wouldn't have been hiding it. And I told Layla that if she had nothing to hide, she wouldn't have stashed photos and cash. She shook her head and reached for me, but I stepped back. She pulled her hand away slowly, like she had just realized something irreversible was happening. My friend tried one more time to insist it was a financial mess, not an emotional one. But the way he kept watching the envelope made it clear he had crossed lines he didn't want to admit yet. Selin broke the silence. She said there was still something I hadn't seen. Something that would make everything fall into place. She said the notebook wasn't just dates. It was a schedule. A set of meetings Layla had been attending twice a week. And the initials belonged to the person she had been meeting. I opened the notebook to another page and saw patterns emerging. Same motel. Same time slot. Same initials. I asked Layla who the initials belonged to. She said nothing. My friend started pacing again, muttering that they should have told me before things escalated. Selin said I deserved the truth, and that this wasn't even the worst part. Layla finally exhaled and said I wasn't supposed to find out like this. I asked her how I was supposed to find out. She didn't answer. My friend whispered that everything was already spiraling and that the involvement of the person with those initials would change everything. Selin crossed her arms and said this mess wasn't only about cheating or debt. It was about a decision Layla made long before saying yes to my proposal. A decision she had been hiding under layers of excuses. Something in that moment shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough that I knew the next step wouldn't be about catching anyone in a lie. The next step would be uncovering something that none of them wanted spoken aloud. And the night, already broken, would only get stranger from here. The parking lot behind the bar felt too open for what was happening. Streetlights buzzed overhead, and the cold air wrapped around us like it wanted to expose everyone's nerves. Layla stood with her arms crossed tight over her chest, her gaze stuck to the ground. My friend kept switching between pacing and stopping, as if motion could rearrange the mess he helped create. Selin stayed firm, watching me, not them. I told them all we were walking to the far side of the lot. If anyone stumbled out of the bar, overheard something, or tried to film, I wasn't going to let this turn into public entertainment. As we moved, the 3 of them formed a loose triangle behind me, each one clearly trying to guess what I would do next. When we reached the back corner of the lot, I turned to face them. The notebook hung from my hand, open to the page with the initials. The faint streetlight reflected off the ink like it wanted to make the letters stand out even more. I asked again, who did these initials belong to? Layla pressed her lips together. My friend looked at the ground. Selin tilted her head, almost disappointed the truth still wasn't coming out. I repeated the question. Layla finally lifted her head. Her voice was quiet, but not broken. She said the initials belonged to someone she owed money to before she met me. She said the debt wasn't small, and the person wasn't patient. She said she made a mistake trusting the wrong people during a time she felt trapped. That explanation didn't match anything in the notebook. Meeting someone twice a week at a motel had nothing to do with old debt management. The pattern was too organized, too consistent, too planned. I asked her why she didn't just tell me she had debt. It wasn't a crime. It wasn't shameful. People dig themselves out of holes every day. There was nothing in that situation that required secrecy. She said I wouldn't have understood. She said I would have asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. She said bringing me into it would have made everything spiral faster. Selin scoffed and said that Layla had more than one reason to hide the truth. And then she added something that cut through the tension like a blade. She said the debt wasn't the root. It was the excuse. The real reason Layla kept going to the motel was standing 10 feet away, pacing back and forth like a man waiting for his sentence. I looked at my friend. He froze mid-step. His eyes gave it away before his mouth did. Layla yelled at Selin to stop making things worse. My friend told her to calm down. I told them both to explain before they buried themselves deeper. My friend stepped forward and said something that threw the night into a completely different direction. He admitted that the debt was real, but the motel meetings were not for negotiating. The person referenced in the initials wasn't a stranger. That person was someone who found leverage in Layla long before I knew any of this existed. He said the person used the debt as pressure, but what they wanted wasn't money. It was access. Access to someone close to me. Access to information. Access to my schedule. Access to things that could be used later. Layla snapped, telling him to stop talking. She tried to grab his arm and pull him back, like dragging him away from the truth would somehow stop it from landing. But he shook her off and said the name behind the initials wasn't just anyone. It was someone who had been around for months. Someone who had met me before. Someone who tried to get close through casual conversations. Someone I had never once thought twice about. The realization formed slowly, heavy, and uncomfortable. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a mystery figure. It was someone who sat across from me at gatherings. Someone who borrowed tools from me once. Someone who had a reason to want a quiet route into my life. Layla squeezed her eyes shut the moment I connected the dots. She didn't just hide cheating. She didn't just hide debt. She hid involvement with someone who wanted something from me. The second twist was suddenly clearer than anything. This wasn't a love triangle. It wasn't a story about passion, temptation, or two people making a reckless choice. It was a mess built on manipulation, pressure, and a decision Layla made when she felt cornered. I asked her how long she had been dealing with this person. She whispered that it started before we ever got engaged. She said she thought she could handle it. She said she never meant for me to get dragged into it. Selin stepped forward and said she should tell the real reason it escalated. She said Layla didn't go to the motel willingly at first. But once she accepted that first meeting, the leverage grew. Every visit became something bigger. The person behind the initials wanted control over Layla because controlling her meant access to me. My friend looked sick. He said he tried to help Layla early on, but he got pulled into it too. He said he made the mistake of agreeing to cover for her because he thought he could negotiate a way out. He said he never expected the situation to evolve into something intimate, but once the motel visits started, everything blurred. Layla broke at that point. Not dramatically, just a slow collapse of resistance. She admitted she had turned to my friend because she trusted him more than anyone else. She admitted she knew she was crossing a line when she met him at the motel without telling me. She admitted that things between them became physical at one point because she was tired of feeling powerless and he offered comfort. That wasn't the twist. That was the inevitable consequence. The twist came from Selin, who had stayed quiet long enough. She stepped toward Layla and said that she had proof of everything. Not because she wanted to destroy her friend, but because she wanted to separate me from a plan that would have spiraled far beyond cheating. Then she dropped the third twist. Selin had been recording the motel visits. Not for money, not for revenge, but because she suspected Layla was being manipulated by the person behind the initials, and she wanted leverage to protect me if things got worse. Layla turned pale instantly. She called Selin insane. She accused her of wanting to break us up so she could insert herself into my life. Selin didn't argue that part. She said she admitted her feelings earlier because she wanted everything out in the open before the truth detonated. She said her confession was messy, but her intention wasn't. She said she recorded the visits because she didn't trust Layla's ability to handle the situation alone, and she didn't trust the person behind the initials. My friend stared at the ground like he had lost track of where the line between right and wrong was. The three of them stood in a triangle of guilt, secrets, and collapsing alliances. Layla was caught between fear and anger. My friend was drowning in his own involvement. Selin looked ready to burn the whole circle to stop it from spreading. And I stood in the center of everything, holding a notebook that contained the schedule of the meetings that unraveled the last year of my life. The next step wasn't guessing who was lying. The next step was getting to the place where the truth started, the motel. And the night wasn't done with any of us. I didn't wait for more arguing. Once all three of them exposed enough pieces of their tangled mess, the next step became obvious. If the motel was the center of everything, the debt, the meetings, the leverage, the reason Layla started choosing secrecy over honesty, then that was where the truth would stop hiding. I told them to get into my car. Layla hesitated and said the motel manager wouldn't remember anything. My friend muttered something about the place being dangerous. Selin simply opened the passenger door and waited. She wasn't scared. She wasn't defensive. She was ready to finish what she started. Layla climbed into the back seat reluctantly. My friend slid in beside her. They sat stiffly, two people who once thought they were in control, but now looked like passengers on a ride they didn't want to be on. The drive wasn't long. The city blurred past the windows in sickly yellow flashes. Every streetlight seemed to highlight another flaw in the story they'd built. Behind me, Layla whispered to my friend, trying to make him promise not to reveal certain details. He whispered back that it was too late. Selin glanced at me and said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more weight than their frantic whispering ever could. The motel appeared like a forgotten piece of the city. Faded paint. Flickering vacancy sign. A lobby lit by a single overhead bulb that made everything look more desolate than it was. I parked and told them all to get out. No one moved at first. Then Selin stepped out, and the others followed because they had no choice. The cold air felt different here. Heavier, like the motel itself had absorbed all the secrets that passed through its walls. Inside the lobby, the manager sat behind a scratched counter, flipping through a magazine that had been outdated for months. When he looked up and saw Layla, something in his expression changed. Recognition came too fast. He asked if she was here for the usual. The silence that followed was the loudest part of the night. Layla's face drained of color. My friend stepped back like he'd been slapped. Selin didn't react. She had expected this. I felt the tension shift from confusion to confirmation. I asked what the usual meant. The manager scratched his cheek and said Layla had been booking the same room every week, always paying in cash, always with a sense of urgency. He mentioned her arriving early, sometimes staying late, sometimes waiting for someone. He didn't know who she met, but he remembered the initials on the room schedule because she requested privacy. Layla tried to shut him down, saying he must be confusing her with someone else. But he pointed to the logbook under the counter and said he didn't forget faces. Selin asked to see the log. He slid it forward. There it was, her handwriting, her signature, the initials, the weekly time slot. No excuses left to hide behind. My friend put both hands on the counter, leaning in as if he needed to physically hold himself up. He whispered that he had told her to stop coming here, that the person she owed had started pushing for more involvement, that Layla kept insisting she could handle it alone. Layla covered her face with her hands. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was calculating, searching for a version of the story that made her look less guilty. I asked her what exactly she had promised that person. She said the debt wasn't just financial. She said she made a deal to buy time and safety. She said she didn't want me dragged into something messy. Selin stepped forward and asked her to tell the rest. The part she had been terrified to say. The part that motivated every motel visit. Layla lowered her hands slowly, looked directly at me, and said the last thing I expected. She had promised that person information about me. Not money. Not favors. Access. She claimed she never intended to deliver anything meaningful, but once the meeting started, the leverage shifted. She said the person threatened to expose her past debt to my family, to her workplace, even to me, unless she complied. She said using my friend as cover seemed safe. Then she admitted that the physical part happened because the situation spun out of control and she reached a point where she didn't care about right or wrong anymore. I asked her why she didn't trust me enough to tell me any of this before our engagement. She said she didn't want to lose me. She said she thought she could outrun the consequences. My friend finally spoke with a level of honesty he hadn't shown all night. He said he initially stepped in to shield her, but once things became intimate between them, he didn't want to stop. He said he convinced himself he was helping her, but he also knew he was helping himself. Selin turned toward me and said the final twist without flinching. The person with the initials had approached her too. Not for money, not for leverage, for manipulation. They wanted her to keep quiet. They wanted her to encourage Layla's secrecy. They wanted her to guide certain conversations when I was around. They wanted her to help build a barrier between me and the truth. She refused. That was when she started watching, recording, collecting evidence. That was when she realized the only way to stop the chain reaction was to expose everything. That was when she confessed her feelings, messy, ill-timed, desperate, because she thought it would force the truth into daylight before the situation reached a point where someone got hurt. The manager watched us quietly, probably accustomed to scenes like this, but not the layers beneath them. I took the notebook out of my pocket and set it on the counter. The manager flipped through it, nodded at the familiar handwriting, and confirmed the initials matched someone who booked rooms under a pseudonym almost every time. The final confirmation didn't make things better. It made them clear. Layla wasn't an innocent victim. My friend wasn't a misguided helper. Selin wasn't a jealous outsider. They were three people caught in a trap that grew roots because they didn't stop it early. And I had been living beside it without knowing. I told the manager we were leaving. He didn't argue. He just slid the logbook back, as if closing a chapter he had witnessed too many times before. Outside, Layla reached for me one last time. Her voice was steady, but empty. She said she wanted another chance to explain. She said we could fix things privately. She said the engagement didn't need to end like this. My friend didn't speak. He looked hollow, like someone who woke up too late to realize what he'd destroyed. Selin watched me with a quiet understanding, not expecting forgiveness, but accepting responsibility for the role she played. There wasn't anything left to salvage. The consequences unfolded the way real consequences do, slowly, then all at once. I ended the engagement that night. I didn't negotiate. I didn't bargain. Layla moved out within the week. The person behind the initials received a report from the motel manager and from the evidence Selin collected. They avoided legal charges narrowly, but their involvement became known enough that they lost their job and moved out of the city. My friend faced disciplinary action at work when several financial inconsistencies linked back to the cash in that envelope. He kept his job, but lost his position and most of his friends. Selin tried to contact me twice afterward, first to apologize for the confession, second to apologize for the recordings. When she became persistent, I requested space, and she respected it. A few months later, she moved to another city and cut ties with the entire group. And me? I rebuilt my life from scratch. No drama. No chaos. Just space. Enough space to understand that stepping out of that bar for a smoke wasn't the beginning of the disaster. It was the beginning of the truth.